Hello, everyone, and welcome, whatever time it is, wherever you are around the world. Welcome to this webinar series on pharmacy and psychology. We hope you're able to get a lot out of it. What we'll ask you to do is, if you've got any questions, we'll be sort of answering questions at the end. So you can write them in the chat, and then what we'll do, or you can hold on to them, and then we'll deal with them at the end. With us today, we have Dr. Christine Paget, Dr. Colin Curtin, Angus Thompson, and Dr. Rahul Patel. And they'll be running through their respective disciplines. So for undergrad pharmacy, it's Angus Thompson. For clinical pharmacy, Colin Curtin. And for Master of Pharmaceutical Sciences, Rahul Patel. And for psychology, Christine Paget. Yeah, we'll get underway with an acknowledgement of country. So we acknowledge Tasmanian Aboriginal people and the elders, past, present, and emerging. And yes, so we will get underway with Angus Thompson.
Thank you, Bob. So welcome everybody, and so I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview today of pharmacy at the University of Tasmania, and particularly focusing on our Bachelor of Pharmacy program. So just to start off, I want to sort of set the scene a little bit for the university's pharmacy education background. We're one of the original 6 universities in Australia to offer pharmacy education. There are now 18. So we have a long track record in delivering pharmacy education at both the undergraduate and the postgraduate level. And we were one of the first universities to offer significant clinical training, and that goes through our undergraduate degree. And as Colin will talk to you about later, we now have a postgraduate offering in that space too. And our school also has a long track record in undertaking research, both laboratory-based and clinical, which has informed medication use and practice in Australia and elsewhere in the world. So we basically set ourselves out to provide a range of programs to meet the needs of pharmacy, the pharmaceutical industry, the healthcare industry more generally. So what I'm going to do to start with is to talk a little bit about our program, and also a little bit about the opportunities for pharmacy and the context in which we operate. You able to move on for me, Bob? Thank you. So that's just an overview of the programs that we offer. And as I say, the 3 of us here today are going to talk about the top 3 of those programs in that order. That would be great. Thanks, Bob. So talking about a Bachelor of Pharmacy with Applied Honours, and I guess this is a good opportunity first to highlight that unique feature of our degree. Of the 18 universities in Australia who offer Bachelor of Pharmacy or degrees which lead to pharmacy registration status, we're one of very few who offer a program that is an applied honours degree. So all our students now do graduate with experience and training in research. So our course has been built on strong foundations over the last 50 years to ensure that our graduates meet the requirements of the Pharmacy Council and the role that the industry wants of them. And so for that reason, our graduates are amongst some of the most work-ready of those 18 schools of pharmacy. So, and on the next slide, you'll see that there are a range of opportunities for pharmacists in Australia. So the majority, probably around 60% of pharmacists in Australia work within community pharmacy, and about 20% in hospital pharmacy, and the remainder spread across a number of other disciplines, as you can see there. So some pharmacists work as consultants doing medication reviews, some increasingly work within general practice, so family doctor clinics, and then within academia, the pharmaceutical industry, government regulatory affairs. So there are a wide range of opportunities for pharmacists in Australia and indeed in many other countries of the world. And those roles are expanding, and that's largely linked to the increasing complexity of medication and in many countries of the world an aging population which receives a large number of medications. I think it's probably useful just to talk for a minute about where the arrangements for the healthcare system in Australia and where pharmacy fits in that. Because in many countries of the world, the healthcare systems differ. But in Australia, pharmacists are fundamental to the delivery of healthcare, both within the public and the private system. within primary care, so your first point of contact, community care, within general hospitals, secondary care, and within tertiary care, which are your major urban centre hospitals where people receive care for very complex things like transplantation, surgery, and so on. And across all those sectors, pharmacists work. And one of the things which puts pharmacists at the core of those services is that most regular medicines in Australia are prescription status, and so pharmacists have huge opportunities not just to be involved in the supply function, but also in the quality use of medicines to ensure that people actually get the best out of those medicines. And that's a big direction of what we focus on in our Bachelor of Pharmacy program, is what we could describe as quality use of medicines. Okay, can you move on for me, Bob? Oh, we've got a little glitch. There we go. No, thank you, Bob. So as I was just saying around our graduates being employable, the statistics bear this out very strongly. So these are statistics compiled by independent organisations, not by the university, that show that UTAS graduates of pharmacy have some of the best employment opportunities of all those 18 schools in the country. So we have better jobs, more ability to get jobs, and better salaries upon graduation. So certainly within some of the major urban centres like Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, supply and demand of pharmacists is not quite as favourable to the employee pharmacist as it is in regional areas of Australia, and certainly the whole of Tasmania and many other areas of regional and rural Australia. There are extremely good employment prospects for pharmacists. And as I've said, as a number of different career opportunities open up, that's likely to only further increase and improve over time. So with all those different choices of providers, why would somebody want to study pharmacy at the University of Tasmania? So I guess the key points I would highlight are, we do have a long track record in our clinical teaching. Many of our students benefit from being taught by people who are clinical practitioners, who work both within the university and in a clinical role. We have very good relationships with our placement providers, both in community and in hospital pharmacy. And I would highlight that we're one of only 6 programs in Australia that guarantee our students a hospital placement. So our students typically spend a week in hospital in 3rd year and 3 weeks in hospital in 4th year, as well as the same amount of hours in community practice. And there are 12 universities in Australia who do not guarantee a hospital placement to their pharmacy students. And when you think that around 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 pharmacists work within that sector, it certainly makes a lot of sense if you've had exposure to that sector during your undergraduate program. We typically have a cohort that's around 45 to 50 per year, varies anywhere between 30 and 70. And in some of our classes, we work in groups as small as 6 or 8. And so our students often have very good exposure to staff, good staff to student ratios. And the students frequently provide feedback through their evaluations that we're approachable, accessible and supportive. And I think that's a really important message, particularly for international students who are far away from home, to have that support network and people keeping an eye on them and nurturing their talent. I think is a really key point of our program. And our staff, many of them have won awards over the years, both nationally and at state level, for their contribution to the profession, research and education. So in terms of entry requirements, I'm not going to go through these line by line because I'm not entirely sure what jurisdictions the attendees are from today, but you can see them there. The equivalent of our 8R80 is described for you, but the key subjects for prerequisites are chemistry and maths. We're often asked if people need biology. It's not a prerequisite. It's certainly desirable, but it's not a prerequisite subject. Chemistry and maths and an 8R equivalent of 80 are our academic entry requirements. The other entry requirements relate to English language, which I'm going to move on to next. And so that standard one is IELTS, so an academic level IELTS of 6.5 with no band less than 6, or alternative entry scores, as you can see there. And one of the reasons we have that set at that level is that particularly when we're talking about pharmacists working as health professionals, working collaboratively with others, doctors, nurses, communicating with them, communicating with patients. Those communication skills are so important. So that's why we do place a strong emphasis on a good standard of English to enter the program. In terms of our fees, so our fees are currently just shy of 35,000 a year, but all international applicants for pharmacy at UTAS, and indeed most programs at UTAS, are automatically assessed for our scholarship, the TIS, which is a generous 25% discount, in addition to which pharmacy also offer some relocation bursaries and sibling discounts. And all those things come on top of the fact that our fees are competitive compared to other providers, and that the cost of living and indeed the quality of life as for students in Hobart is extremely good and favourable compared to some of the major urban centres elsewhere. Okay, so with that, I'm going to wrap up the bachelors, and I'm happy to take some questions later. But I'd like to hand over to my colleague Rahul Patel. Thank you.
Hello everyone. As mentioned by Angus, my name is Rahul Patel, and I coordinate the Master of Pharmaceutical Science, otherwise known as MPharmSci program. Now this course is a 2-year full-time course. Now one of the important features of this program is that it combines the coursework units with a research component. For example, in year 1, students learn important pharmaceutical science and biomedical science related units and subjects, and learning in year 1 is broadly divided into different sections, if you like. For example, in the beginning, in semester 1, students basically learn the basic but important concepts of pharmaceutical science. And in the second semester, mainly they learn the operations of sophisticated analytical and pharmaceutical instruments. And the students absolutely enjoy the fact that they do not only learn how to use these highly sophisticated analytical instruments that are heavily used in pharmaceutical companies, but also they carry out an entire 1 year of research project using these instruments. And I'll talk about this research component a bit later on. But there are mainly 2 intakes. One is the Feb and other is the July as far as this course is concerned. And importantly, this course is very popular, in fact, among international students. So currently across the 2 years, there are more than 70 students enrolled into the course. And all of them, and I said yes, all of them are international students. So we get students from the Indian subcontinent countries, from Middle Eastern countries, from African countries, from Indonesia, Philippines, from all around the world. Now, there are many reasons why this course is popular among international students. And I'll briefly discuss some of these reasons one by one, which are listed on the next slide. So the one reason is the way we teach them by providing one-on-one, in other words, individualized support. The teacher to student ratio is maintained well in this course. Of course, the ratio varies from session to session. It depends on the unit as well. But in general, this ratio is 1:4 or 1:6. And this, in fact, provides us the opportunity to tailor our teaching style depending on the academic caliber of a student. So, for example, there is always one tutor available per 4 to 6 students during a session, making sure that all the students learn the required content and no one is left behind. Now, apart from this, the course provides a student. Can we go to the next slide more, please? Thank you. So apart from this, this course provides a student with a wide range of career opportunities. For example, our graduates are employed by the pharmaceutical companies, as well as research institutions, and many of them go on and do a PhD. However, important thing is that we are here to help them not only when they are students, but also after the graduation. So for example, at this stage, we have at least 8 current PhD students at the University of Tasmania who are Master Pharmaceutical Science graduates, and all of them are international students. Despite of that fact, they do not pay fees while doing their PhD. In fact, they get a financial scholarship while doing it. And we have also produced many PhD students who were MPharmSci graduates in the last 5 years. Also, we try to retain good MPharmSci graduates. Currently, we have 3 Master of Pharmaceutical Science graduates, excluding me, who are employed by the School of Pharmacy and Pharmacology, and they are in fact helping us in teaching year 1 and year 2 MPharmSci students, and many of our students are pharmacists from overseas. So some of them clear the registration exam before they start working as a registered pharmacist in Australia. Could we go to the next slide? As I said, that this is a unique course because it provides these coursework units as well as a research component. So what happens in the first year, they learn the basic concepts and the fundamentals of pharmaceutical science and related units. But then in the second year, they actually apply the knowledge which they have acquired during these first year units, and they carry out the research project in the second year. And for many of them, this is the first time they have the flavor of this research project, and most of them in fact become addicted to this flavor. Anyways, they absolutely enjoy doing a research project, not only because they carry out the research projects in the state-of-the-art research facilities, but also the outcomes of the research projects are very important. They are directly applicable and helpful not only to healthcare professionals, but also to patients in general. Now, like Bachelor of Pharmacy international students, 2-year post-study work visas are available for all the Master of Pharmaceutical Science graduates. And as I said, good MPharmSci graduates manage to get employment after graduating the course. So they go and work in pharmaceutical industries, various research institutions, and it is not uncommon for us to see that that MPharmSci students go on and complete a PhD. Can we have the next slide? Now, I'm going to read just 2 or 3 emails which I received from recent MPharmSci graduates, and this is one of them. So she said, I'm glad to inform you that I have secured a job as a production associate at PCI Pharma Services. The company is based in Melbourne, but the important thing was that she was interviewed for 1 hour, and she said that she received the job offer because the knowledge and skills that she acquired through the Master of Pharmaceutical Science course. And in the last 4 or 5 years, we have actually restructured this Master of Pharmaceutical Science course to achieve these things, to make sure that MPharmSci graduates have the skills that are required by their employers when the pharmaceutical companies and so on. The next one is the second email that I received, and that student said, I'm very much delighted to inform you that I have secured a job at Bachelor Pharmaceuticals, and I would like to give all the credit to the course. So we are producing graduates that are in demand. So pharmaceutical companies need people with this sort of skills. And the next one is a very interesting one. So always students and graduates think that our employers will be pharmaceutical industries only. That is not the case. In fact, we have several MPharmSci graduates who work as a quality control analyst, which are in non-pharmaceutical industries. So, for example, in cosmetic industries, in food industries, they use a similar sort of instruments to control their quality of the products as the ones that are used in pharmaceutical companies. She was our MPharmSci graduate, and she's not working in pharmaceutical companies. She's working in a company that makes beer, by the way. And for the quality control analysis, they use similar sort of instruments. And for the English requirements, it is same as the Bachelor of Pharmacy students. So I'll score 6.5 overall with not less than 6 in each module, and we also accept alternative English assessments. Prerequisites are mainly science-based bachelor's degree, but most of our students are Bachelor of Pharmacy graduates. Apart from this, we also have scholarships available. So like Bachelor of Pharmacy students, a Tasmanian International Scholarship, which is 25% of the total fees, is available for the students. So it means that a student does one semester essentially free. And if students don't get that scholarship, then they are automatically eligible for the bursary scholarship, which is basically $3,000. Now I'll hand it over to Colin.
Okay, I think we're about to go. So my name's Colin Curtin, and I coordinate the series of courses in the postgraduate clinical pharmacy space. Perhaps we can go to the next slide. Yeah, good. So in this space, we try to teach students about evidence-based practice, and we apply so that students can learn about complex cases that they can apply to situations that are relevant to both their hospital and community pharmacy settings. So most of the teaching is available through assignment-based methods, and in each of the core clinical units, there's 6 core clinical units which cover a whole range of clinical spaces such as respiratory, renal, infectious diseases, cardiovascular, and so on. And each of these units you also get to, or the students get to present live over the internet, a PowerPoint slide or a poster based on whatever topics they've covered within that unit. So it does help to develop their clinical presentation skills, and a little bit of research is required to go into developing those slides. Each of the assignment-based material involves quite complex case scenarios. The students do get a choice of cases within each unit that they cover, and it really helps them to develop the skills of researching where to find the best evidence. Often it requires utilising database searching and being able to interpret clinical literature to then pull it together and apply it to their cases. So the kind of approach in these units is really, it's not a standard coursework learn and repeat methodology. It's really a method of making the students go out of their comfort zone, making them search for that information they need and synthesize information to present their results for the assignments and for their presentation projects. That's a part of what the suite of courses, hang on, here we are. Sorry, all the slides are moving, confuses me. So this is a good approach to enhance their professional development, really develops their critical analytical skills and their clinical decision making, and also their evidence-based management skills through this ability to synthesize and search for literature and analyze it in a critical way. This approach is good for career advancement. So we have, particularly in Australia, and I think it's similar around other countries in the world, is that when you've developed or got a degree in this space, particularly in a hospital setting, hospital managers recognise it and they may provide a higher pay rate to the student. and they may also allow the student to develop a particular pathway into a particular area of practice that they might be particularly interested in. For example, as an infectious disease pharmacist, for example. Okay, maybe we'll go forward one slide. Okay, what have we got here? Right, so we've got a suite of nested courses. So graduate certificate should be available for semester 2, but it's being finalised at the moment. That's a short 4-unit course. The graduate diploma, which most people are probably aware of, is a 6-unit course, which covers the clinical coursework space. And for those students that wish to direct entry into masters, or they can articulate, they can complete a certificate or a diploma over a period of time and then articulate into masters. The full masters course includes 6 clinical units, and then the remainder of the coursework, another 6 units, covers a research space. So they learn to develop a project methodology, a literature review, they learn how to approach and deal with ethics committees, and then they go into actually doing all the stuff that's required, the data collection, the statistical analysis, the write-up, and completion of a thesis, which is a coursework thesis, not a full research thesis, because this whole course is mainly coursework based, but it's a small research project which helps develop those research skills, which again can be very useful, particularly for pharmacists that are working in a hospital or a specialised clinic setting. I've had students, a lot of Australian students do this. Of the international students I've had, I've currently got one that has completed their coursework masters at a diabetes institute in Kuwait, which involved surveying patients about aspects of diabetes care, and then she wrote up the results of that. I've had ones do searching hospital records to solve an issue of, I can't remember now, of medication management in hospitals in Hong Kong. I have a student in Austria at the moment who's nearly completed her thesis, and she's been researching the quality of pharmaceutical journals around the world. So there's a lot of space for these various projects to be conducted. The key thing is that all of this research is done in the student's home country, and we organise and discuss what needs to be done to make a project work for that student in their country. Right, I think that's all for this slide. I think I've covered some of this already. So developing these additional skills will allow the student to have the opportunity to go into specialised areas such as infectious disease, or some pharmacists going down the path of thromboembolic specialisations, and virology is another one with COVID at the moment. It definitely helps you to develop the communication skills to collaborate with other healthcare professionals. It also helps you develop those skills to talk to healthcare professionals at their level. So if you have that background of knowledge where you can research an issue in depth, you can talk about that issue to other healthcare professionals in quite some depth. It improves your research skills, because definitely if they go on into masters, they really can upskill in that space. What else? It does help with regulatory bodies with pharmacovigilance, because we do have some students that do research projects in the pharmacovigilance space, and different countries around the world have differing abilities or different, what's the word I'm looking for? In some countries, pharmacovigilance is well developed. In others, it needs to be further developed, and there's certainly a lot of potential for research in that space. We don't do clinical trials through this master's course, but once the student has a basic understanding of how a research project works and the various components, it makes them more capable of then being able to be involved in clinical trials in the future, which are often conducted through hospital settings as well. Okay, that's for that slide. Career enhancement, I've kind of covered that already. There is potential for academic opportunities. So once you've been able to complete one of these degrees, you can show that to perhaps a university you're applying to say, I've done this research, I'm quite capable of doing a literature analysis, I'm quite skilled with my writing and presentation skills. These things can help with academic opportunities. Also, we have a couple of students that do continue on postmasters, as Rahul has already mentioned, and then move into the PhD space. So we've got one guy is doing PhD to do with pharmacovigilance, and there's another lady doing, I can't remember what she was doing, but she was doing surveys in multiple countries around the world towards her PhD, and that came about because she loved her masters so much that she then followed up into the research career space. That's all I can think of on that slide. Okay, so entry requirements, we do need people to have a degree in pharmacy or an international equivalent. Ideally, we want people to have a minimum of 1 year workplace practice so that they really do understand how pharmacy works or how pharmacy practice works in their country. It's one thing to learn the basics of pharmacy through a degree, but then when you have to deal with other healthcare professionals and dealing with tricky situations with patients and so on, that extra level of experience is really beneficial. The other thing, I don't think it's mentioned on these or the other slides, is as with Rahul and Angus before, we need an IELTS of 6.5 or higher because you do need to be able to communicate at quite a high level. I think that's about all for that slide. Thank you, Bob. Fees and scholarships. Oh, okay, this is across the board. I'm not sure who's leading this. And I'm not sure who's leading this. Is this Bob?
That's all right. Sorry, I'm just coming back in there. So thank you very much, Colin. Is there anything else you'd like to add at this point?
Nothing more from me, thank you.
Nothing more? All right, well, thank you very much. And if anyone wants to get in touch, please ask questions, but you can also find out more about us online. So we'll now pass over to Christine Paget, who's waiting for us, and we'll go from there. So if my slides will work, 1 second. There we go. So over to you, Christine.
Thanks, Bob. So as Bob said, my name's Christine Paget. I'm the course coordinator for the undergraduate degree of the Bachelor of Psychological Sciences, but I'll also talk to you about the master's opportunities that we have at UTAS. So if I could have the next slide, thank you. So I think it's important really to note from the start that in psychology, the opportunities that we offer are probably a bit broader than some people think about when we talk about psychology. So we often think about clinical psychology, but there are other areas that we research in psychology. So we look at all aspects of human behaviour really. And that can really help you to have a really good understanding of a wide range of things. So through psychology, you learn about human behaviour in terms of motivation. So why do people engage in certain behaviours? How can we improve people's mental health? Look at things like clinical disorders and treatment of those. And we'll also look at the more neurological side of psychology as well. So we can think about things like how the brain works. We can explore neurological function through a range of different tools. For example, we use things like transcranial magnetic stimulation and things like that, and EEG, as you can see on the slide there as well. And we also look at things like how people learn, how they solve problems, make decisions. And this can be applied across a really broad range of areas. So thinking about things like in virtual reality, gaming processes, etc., and also just quite complex decision making as well. Next slide, thank you. So we teach our students a really broad range of skills, I think. So we obviously look at psychological theory and talk about how that relates to human behaviour. So students get a really good understanding of a broad range of human behaviours. But we also focus quite heavily on giving students the ability to think critically about things and to develop some skills that can be really useful across a range of non-psychological jobs, I guess you could say. So applying critical thinking and research skills in a broad range of areas. We also focus on clinical psychology, so students have a really good understanding by the time they've finished an undergraduate degree about the range of different clinical disorders that can occur and the various types of therapy that we can offer. We also teach our students a broad range of skills in terms of communication skills. So we encourage students to engage in a range of different activities, and this includes written work, but also doing oral presentations so that they can develop those verbal presentation skills, and also teach them how to present complex technical information in a way that can be easily understood by patients as well as other people that perhaps don't work in that field of psychology. Next slide, thank you. So I think it's important to emphasize that we think about psychology as sort of two different, or having two different components. It's very much a science, and we do develop a lot of scientific and analytical skills when we're teaching our students, but it is also a profession. And so we're teaching students about how to engage with people, how to communicate, provide good skills around understanding how they can work not just with individuals but in broader communities to look at things like improving mental health and well-being. Next slide, thank you. So there's a really broad range of research that's being undertaken at UTAS, University of Tasmania at the moment. So we have some really great research coming out from a range of different areas. So we have a lot of academics currently looking at a range of different psychological disorders. For example, we have people researching chronic brain, multiple sclerosis, dementia, as well as a broad range of other disorders, and we're looking at how we can understand how these disorders develop and also how they can be treated. We also have a number of researchers who are looking at that biological relationship between neuroscience and behaviour, and so we have people working with animal models to determine patterns of addiction, for example, and a range of different areas in that space as well. We also have researchers who look at things like language development and development across the lifespan, so the way that children develop in their thought and behaviour all the way through to how we change into later life. We also look at things like social settings, so thinking about how different environments can change the way that we behave, and so some of our researchers are looking at things like how people respond in scenarios where they might need to give testimony. So we have some work in forensic psychology, for example. As I mentioned before, we also do look at things like how game and virtual reality are important now in terms of how we might respond in those environments, but also thinking about how we can use those technologies to improve people's mental health, for example. So using virtual reality to help people overcome phobias and those sorts of things we focus quite heavily on as well in psychology. So there's a lot of really new cutting edge emerging technologies that we're currently using in our research and in our teaching as well. And thinking as well about how people might respond in certain environments. So for example, we have researchers who are looking quite closely at how people engage when they have to go to the Antarctic, because as you're probably aware, University of Tasmania has a strong research area in looking at going to the Antarctic to do research. So how do people behave and work in those really extreme environments? So as you can see, we've got quite a broad range of research, and obviously this translates into our teaching as well. So our students get a really good exposure to a really broad range of different areas of psychology. Yeah, you can pop through this. Thanks, Bob. And so, of course, there is a range of different job opportunities that our students will have as a result of doing a Bachelor of Psychological Science or doing our postgraduate studies as well. For example, counselling, so working with people to work through mental health issues or providing other sorts of support. We have some of our graduates go off and work in schools, for example, or aged care facilities. Health services as well, we often have our students working in a range of different areas where they might be liaising with other health professionals as well. Disability services are definitely another area that we are involved in, and community and youth work. Many of our graduates go on to do those sorts of roles. Probably a little bit different to the way some people think about psychology. We can also provide our students with some really good skills around how to, as I said before, think critically and provide some really good analytical skills which can help people in developing social policy and also the research spaces. We often also have our students work in other areas such as human resources and industrial relations, because we do give them some of those good communication skills and helping to identify patterns of behaviour, which can be really helpful in those spaces. We do also have some of our graduates go off and work in armed or police forces, so this can be in a range of different areas there, as well as legal agencies and also things like advertising and marketing. So as you can see, there's a really broad range of opportunities that our students have. It's not just restricted to the more typical psychological jobs that people might think about, but actually we give them some really good skills that can help them to really be competitive in a range of different other disciplines or areas of work as well. Next slide, thank you. So I'll just run through now, first of all, the undergraduate pathways, and then talk about the master's pathways, so postgraduate after that. So our main undergraduate degree for psychology is the Bachelor of Psychological Science. It runs for 3 years. As you can see, it's just under $33,000 per year. It says here that the location is Launceston and Hobart, but we do also offer that up at the Cradle Coast campus, which is located up on our northwest coast of Tasmania. Students can enrol either in first or second semester for this degree. Our entry requirements are locations level. We don't have requisites for the Bachelor of Psychological Science, even though we do encourage people to have some mathematics or psychological or other science subjects as part of their initial or as part of their previous education, but that isn't necessary. In terms of English language, 6.5 is the minimum and no band lower than 6. Next slide, thanks, Bob. And as I just mentioned, we do have our degree located at all 3 campuses, all 3 core campuses that we have at the University of Tasmania. Next slide. So students can also do a major in psychology through a different degree as well. And so we're really flexible in how students can do a psychology major. So there are a range of other bachelor degrees which students can do psychology in, as well as our psychological science one. So students who are doing Bachelor of Arts, for example, Bachelor of Science, Business or Law, all have the opportunity to do a major in psychology as well. We do have a university college pathway as well, and some other joint degrees where they can do psychology. Next slide, thank you. So our undergraduate degrees will give people a qualification in psychology, but it doesn't give them the qualifications to go on and become a registered psychologist in Australia. So that does require postgraduate training on top of that 3-year degree. So as well as the 3-year degree, if people want to become a registered psychologist in Australia, they need to complete a 4th honours year. So this is comprised of some coursework and a research project, and then they can apply to do one of our master's degrees. So we have 2 core master's training programs that are available. There's the Master of Professional Psychology. In this master's unit, a master's degree, students do 1 year of coursework and then they have a year of supervised practice. Or the master's degree in clinical psychology comprises of 2 years of coursework, research and practice, and I'll run through each of those in a bit more detail in these slides coming up. So next slide. So the Master of Professional Psychology, you actually do 1 year in the university, and then there is supervision outside of the university. So it is important to be mindful that there might be visa requirements beyond what we put in place for the University of Tasmania, because that is that external placement for this. It is located just in Hobart, and we do offer intakes just in first semester. As you can see, the English language requirements are 7 or higher. And as I say, this does take 2 years to get the full qualification, even though you're doing just 1 year of actual coursework and then placement after that. Next slide, thank you. So the Masters of Clinical Psychology is a 2-year program. It comprises of coursework, but also there is a research component here. One of the really good things I think about the Master of Clinical Psychology is that the research component is really applied. So students engage in clinical research. They have one-to-one interactions with their supervisor. So they have a project where they work very closely with an academic. So they develop some really strong research skills as well as those really strong professional training skills as well. So as well as the research and coursework, they also have placements. So they have a really broad variety of areas that they can experience some training in. So they might be working with child psychology, clinical mental health support in specific areas, doing telehealth training so that they can engage with people in online environments as well as a really broad range of other opportunities for placements as well. The Master of Clinical Psychology is located just in Hobart, and again, the intake is just in semester 1. The number of entries or people that enrol each year is usually around the 30 mark. So at any one time, we have about 60 odd people in the course. And in terms of entry requirements, as I mentioned before, they do need to have done that undergraduate training, which comprises of a 4-year accredited sequence. So the Australian system is we require that Australian accredited sequence or something similar with a reasonably good score in terms of their honours. And again, the English language requirements sit at 7 or higher. And I think that might be it, Bob. Is there one more slide? Yeah, so feel free to either contact myself or tap into our website, and we're very happy to answer any questions. But I think I'll wrap it up there and hand back to you. Thanks, Bob.
All right, thank you very much. And what we might do is pass over to Mona, who has the questions.
Thank you so much, Bob, and thank you so much to everyone for providing such a comprehensive presentation. I definitely learned a lot from it. I hope our audience members definitely learned from it. There was a lot of information to digest, but I did have a couple of questions come through. The first one I'll ask is from Kevin, one of our audience members. Possibly Angus, if you want to respond to this one. So he's asked, to become a pharmacist, the pharmacy board requires internship. Does the University of Tasmania assist students to find the internship for undergraduate or postgraduate degrees?
Okay, yeah, thank you for that one, Mona, and thank you, Kevin. That's a really good question, Kevin. The intern year is totally separate to the UTAS pharmacy degree. We need to be very clear and honest about that. However, our graduates have an extremely good track record of securing intern positions. And I guess some of that comes down to the fact that we do have such a good placement program, and we do generate graduates who are so work ready. Many of our students will go on placement into during 3rd and 4th year, and if they create a good impression, effectively they will often line themselves up for a job. Some of them will actually, on their last day of placement, the manager will often say to them that, you know, we've really enjoyed you being here, you've been great as part of our team. If you're looking for an internship next year, let us know. We hear many stories like that. So our students, we do not arrange their internship. It is a competitive environment. You do get paid as an intern. It's a job, but certainly our degree and the quality of our graduates equip themselves very well in the workplace to secure those positions. So that's, I guess, does that answer your question, Kevin?
I'm sure it does. He hasn't responded yet, but I hope that answers your question, Kevin. But while I do have you, Angus, I've got a question that always gets asked by a lot of students when I do fairs overseas. Well, used to, not now, and by agents as well. A lot of students tend to get confused about applied honours versus honours. So with the Bachelor of Pharmacy, during their 4th year when they're doing their applied honours, what do they particularly take part in terms of an applied honours compared to an honours degree?
Yep, so I guess the first thing to stress is that whilst we've talked generically about our Bachelor of Pharmacy with applied honours, there is still an option for students to do individual honours. So it's just that our core degree is now the applied honours degree. So everybody will graduate with that from now on, or all new students will. And so they do a group project. So they have some research skills training in a dedicated unit in 3rd year, and then they collect data and analyse that data and write up that data as a group in 4th year. So that's the standard, that's the core, there's no extra fees for that, that's part of the basic degree. For those students who are high achievers at the end of 2nd year, and they are invited to undertake individual honours as an overload in 3rd and 4th year. And so they do incur a small additional charge for that. But if they do perform well in that individual honours project, which can be clinical, it can be laboratory based, working closely with academics, if they get a 1st-class honours degree, that does set them up well for the future in terms of returning to do a research higher degree. So there's 2 options. Everybody does applied, high achievers have the option to do individual.
Fantastic. That was really clear. I also myself sometimes get confused, so that clarified it definitely. Thank you, Angus.
But we've only introduced the applied honours programme in the last couple of years, so that is understandable why there's some uncertainty, and also because it is one of the unique features of our programme. There's not many other programmes that are like that. So
definitely. I've got another question. It's actually from Tululope. She's asked, would love to know about pharmacy profession practice after master's postgraduate. What are the requirements to practice as a pharmacist in Australia? Not sure who would be suitable to answer that.
Do you guys, Colin, Rahul, want to take it, or do you want me to take that one? I guess the issue is that the Pharmacy Board of Australia lay down registration requirements, and you have to have undertaken a program of study that is eligible for registration at the end of an intern year. So of the programs we've talked about today, our bachelor's program is the one that leads to the majority of people registering as a pharmacist. In Colin's program, many of those are already registered pharmacists and are looking to upskill. And in Rahul's program, as Rahul mentioned, many of his students are also people who are maybe registered overseas as a pharmacist, but the Masters of Pharmaceutical Science itself doesn't lead to registration. So students may then need to look at other avenues in terms of internship arrangements to meet the board's requirements.
Fantastic.
Did either you, Colin or Rahul, want to add to that?
No, that's fine. What you pointed out, Angus, was absolutely spot on. So Master of Pharmaceutical Science program is basically designed for students who wanted to pursue their career either in pharmaceutical industries or who wanted to go on and do a PhD rather than working as a registered pharmacist. But as I pointed out, some of our students or graduates are registered pharmacists from another country, and they wanted to have their career options widen, and therefore some of them go on and take the registration exam to demonstrate that their pharmacy knowledge is equivalent to a 4th year pharmacy student or recent pharmacy graduate who would have done Bachelor of Pharmacy from Australian institution. And once they clear that registration exam, then they are eligible to do that 1 year of intern training, and then they sit for the stage 2 registration exam.
Thank you so much, Angus and Rahul. That definitely clarified it, I think, for Tolulope, I hope. Christine, I had a question for you. So I know you mentioned, we can do, well, students can do psychological science as a major in a Bachelor of Arts or Science. Can you please clarify what is the main difference of that? Is it just, so if a student wants to do a Bachelor of Psychological Science, usually students tend to confuse between doing it as a major or an actual bachelor degree?
Sure, thank you. So with the Bachelor of Psychological Science, the core focus, of course, is psychology. And so we have within psychology core units, which are those which students have to do in order to get into honours or to go on to do masters. And then we have broader elective or optional units, which also focus on psychology, but they aren't considered part of our accredited pathway. And so within the Bachelor of Psychological Science, we focus quite heavily on a range of different psychology elements, whereas if you were to go through the Bachelor of Science or Bachelor of Arts, you would still be able to do those core units potentially, but you would be also expected through science or arts colleges to also be undertaking some other units that were as part of their degree. And so potentially sometimes people might do double majors where they might do psychology and something else, or they might be focusing on a different major altogether but pick up some psychology units as electives. So I guess you could say that the Bachelor of Psychological Science gives you a really broad option. The other thing to bear in mind is I think we're in the process, or actually no, I won't say that just yet. We're just having some changes that I'm just trying to think about whether or not they're likely to get through at the moment. But no, I think that's probably the main distinction. Does that make sense?
Yep, definitely. Yes, a lot of students tend to, when they're having counseling sessions, they're not sure what to do. So that definitely clarifies it. Thank you so much, Christine. The other question I had for you, Christine, was I know one of the entry requirements was a 4-year APAC accredited sequence. Can you just elaborate a little bit more as to what the APAC accredited sequence means?
Sure. So as I just mentioned before, we have core units within the degree, which are those which are evaluated by an external accrediting committee. So the Australian Psychological Accreditation Committee looks at degrees across Australia, and if you have an accredited degree, that means that you are able to then go on and do other postgraduate training and become registered as a psychologist. So in another university, for example, they might not have an accredited pathway, which would mean that their degree wouldn't allow people to go on to do some of that postgraduate work. So we have an accredited pathway which has those core units in it, which have been evaluated by an external regulatory body to make sure that it's covering, or that our degree is covering, all the important elements of psychology that are needed to go on for that further training.
Fantastic. I've got 2 more questions and then I think I'll wrap it up there because there's not many questions coming through. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to type them in and we can try and get them answered if we can live, otherwise it'll be afterwards. But Colin, I've got a question for you. I remember on your slide you mentioned that there was a 1-year work experience required as an entry. Is the type of work experience, does it vary, or is there a specific type of work experience that a student must have as the entry?
Yes, ideally the student has had work experience in pharmacy practice, whether it's in a hospital or a community setting is ideal, or other settings as well. It just helps to, I guess, broaden their real world experience of practice of pharmacy before then coming into it, tackling some of the clinical case questions and things that we put to them through the course.
Fantastic. And the last one is to Rahul. So Rahul, we had a webinar last week about Masters of Lab Med, but the question I get asked a lot is what is the main difference between Masters of Pharmaceutical Science and a student who wants to do lab med. A lot of students tend to get confused as to which one to go for, and a lot of students do favor the Masters of Lab Med depending on the course structure. But I guess for students who are confused or are not sure, what is the main difference between those two?
Thanks for your question. I'm going to be very honest here. I need to look into the course structure of that course first in order for me to find out the differences between these two courses.
Okay.
So I'm happy to have it discussed with you later on, and then you can pass on this information to the students.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Well, I don't see any more questions coming in. So thank you so much to all of our panelists. Thank you, Bob, for sharing your screens with your slides. And I guess I'll wrap it up. We will have a recording of this session with the slides available in a few days. So thank you all for joining, and I hope everyone has a good morning, good evening, or good afternoon. So thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.